Welcome back to Juice's Arthropods. I am Juice, and man, I cannot wait to get started with our care guides. I mean, if you see the shelves behind me, I've got so many species to discuss, but I wanted to reserve the first spot for us with one of my favorite millipedes by all time, for all times, the Chicobolus spinigerus, or the Ivory Millipede, very commonly found in Florida and Georgia and the surrounding states, and just absolutely a truly amazing pet. So let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about with the Ivory Millipede, I'm sorry guys, I'm not going to do the Latin every time, it's a mouthful, is their diet. This is something that very commonly people, when they think millipedes, they think detritivores, they think just rot. These guys also do that. However, they also really love vegetables and fruits, and they really take protein very well. So what I always like to do with mine, first I like to have a tub like this, because obviously I'm breeding them, so I need something that has a little bit more room. Now, you don't have to have something this size, but this is highly recommended if you do want them to breed, is to have something this, or even much bigger, honestly. This is just one of my starter kits for this. As far as diet goes, I don't know if you can see some of these pieces in here. I go with the organic butternut squash, so I love to do some vegetables. Now, this particular piece is a little bit harder, but what you're gonna know with these guys is they won't really go after it until it begins to get moist and a little gross. Now, I know some people that get really concerned with fruits and vegetables. They'll add it to the cage, and then after a couple days, if it gets a little bit weird or moldy, they'll take it out. One thing that I want to address is that if your ventilation, as you guys can see, if you can't, it's these little pinholes here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. If your ventilation is good and you have an abundance of springtails, which, disclaimer, you should have in every single one of your cages. They're freaking amazing. If you have that, within 2 weeks, any mold issues you would normally have will absolutely go away. So vegetables, huge for these guys. Some protein, I like to do freeze-dried shrimp. They take that very, very well. And I give them only a little bit of fruit. I don't like to give them too much fruit because it's a little bit sugary and it will mold a lot faster. But then, we're going to go into a little bit more when we discuss substrate, but your substrate is going to be, it's very crucial for the feeding process that you have a lot of leaf litter, a lot of different things that they can consume. So we'll go into that a little bit later. So the next thing I want to discuss is humidity and temperatures. So I get to live in California, which means that my temperatures are always perfect. It's like 75 to 80 degrees. But if you have any kind of central air, you can always set that as well. If you want to breed them, obviously you might want to get them just a little bit warmer, closer to that 80 side. But humidity is absolutely crucial with this species because they are from Florida. So you want to make sure you have anywhere between 70 to 80% humidity. And this is very easy to accomplish. Now, some people will be like, well, I have a hygrometer. You really don't need any of that. Very simple rule of thumb with any of these species, because for some reason people think that because they're an insect, they're also stupid. Okay, they're an arthropod. That's another pedantic semantic argument. Anyways, with them, all I do is I will make sure that I have a hydration side. So one side of my cage, so this is a 15-quart tub, I will spray basically everything on one side of this. And I will leave the other side a little bit damper, but not as damp as that side. The reason I do this is obviously because they are chitinous. Sometimes they, you don't want them to be too wet, because when they're molting, if anybody's ever had spiders or anything like that, you can have like kind of a bad molt. You don't want that. So I let them kind of pick however they want to do things. So I have one side that's, more damp, another side that's just a little bit drier. And what I'll do, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I'll have just my leaf litter, a majority of it on one side. It'll be mixed throughout the soil. So what I do is I take my soil and I just basically crush everything up in that. And then I will have some just like little areas and little hides that they can kind of be under. So that way, if at any point in time they just want to hide from me, or if they are going down to molt, then they don't have to worry about it. So make sure one side is a little bit more wet. One side's, again, not dry. They need to be humid, but just a little bit drier at the end of the day. One thing that's very, very important when we talk about humidity. Some of you, when you heard me say you wanted to be humid and damp, you heard wet. Don't do that. If you can take the soil and squeeze the water out of it, that's way too damn wet. Don't do that at all. You want your soil to be this like really nice, black, but just slightly damp. I would say it kind of should feel like a potted plant that you've watered adequately, but it should never at any point be wet. What you run the risk of is harming your millipede at that point. So, but if you have a nice black soil, and it's just a little bit, like a little wet, you know, a little damp to the touch, you can kind of feel it. It might stick to your fingers a little bit. Perfect. That's exactly what you want. And when you have your top on, you'll know if it's too humid in there because or that your ventilation is bad because of the humidity, is because it will get wet on top. It'll be like cloudy. I have examples, but I unfortunately am stuck in a little tiny space. It'll basically look like you've got rain clouds. If you're doing that, that's way too damn wet. You want it to be where it has some moisture along the sides and you can see that, but you don't want it to be just absolutely a wet nightmare. So the next thing I wanted to discuss is substrate. Now, I want to pause for 1 second. If you listen to nothing else I say in this entire video, just listen to this one. This is the most important thing. All of the other things, these species are pretty hardy, so they will survive. But if you mess this part up, they're dead. There's no coming back from this, okay? So it's very crucial you listen to this. You're here? You're listening? Perfect. So, substrate. This is very important. A lot of people, I was just talking about this today with somebody, they will go out and they will buy cocoa fiber. Don't do that for most things, but really don't do it for this one. So cocoa fiber lacks something that's very, very crucial, and it's that it's not humid for a long enough time. It's also just not a good substrate. What you want with any kind of millipede, because they are detritivores, and this also works with isopods too, by the way, is you want a good soil that's going to have the ability to have all the rotten wood and everything that you're having in there. You know, it all mixes around. So I personally use Reptisoil for everything, and I'm not sponsored by Reptisoil. They are absolutely best to date as far as soil because of two major reasons. I'm a breeder. See all these bins behind me? Do you know how many hundreds of pounds of soil I have to use? Do you know how expensive cocoa fiber would be if I had chose to do that? So I use Reptisoil because it's got a mix of several different things in it. Now you can make your own substrate, okay? I want to preface this. There are lots of people out there that are using organic potting soil and maybe adding a little bit of sand to it, and you can absolutely do that. I just am lazy, so I pick Reptisoil. But now the next part is I like to take leaf litter and I like to take the Reptisoil and I like to crush it up and just make an amalgam. So what I like to do is take, I use magnolia leaves pretty consistently, and the reason for that is magnolia leaves and oak. I don't know any species alive that like will die eating these, and that's why. So I use a lot of magnolia leaves. So what I will do is I will take the magnolia leaves, and because they're big, I will crush them down. Now you can use oak leaves if they're more readily available. I'm gonna make a whole different video on how to make your own substrates and things like that at some point, but you wanna make sure that it's crushed throughout. You also want a lot of rotting wood and cork bark. I know I've gone on a diatribe before about cork bark, but you cannot have enough cork bark. So I will have the cork bark spread throughout. I'll break it off in chunks. I mean, if you have local wood by your house, the only thing I would stop you from using is pine, only because I don't know enough to know if pine is good for them, but pine does kill a lot of things because it has natural insecticides and stuff. So I would just kind of avoid that particular wood. An arborist, you can hit me up if that's a problem. But what you're going to want to do is just make a lot of the rotting wood. I also put a lot of sphagnum moss in there because it keeps a little bit of the humidity in. You just want just a gross soup of dirt and leaves and wood, and you want it to rot, and it's just awesome. So really, really crucial though, because the millipedes, not only are they going to eat the foods, the fruits, the vegetables, and things you give them, but because they are detritivores, they're going to go through and they're going to just really just chew a lot of that stuff up. So their home is essentially just a giant buffet. So you want to make sure that you have a lot of things for them. I don't know if they use it, but I really like to make sure that I have just a little bit of cuddle bone in everything's cage. You know, and I always look for just little things to see if they have them in there, just because I don't like to assume a creature couldn't benefit from it when there's such an amazing source of calcium that anything chitinous, I like to just have it in there in case, with the exception of obviously my predatory insects. But everything else, I like to make sure that they have some of this cuddle bone just in case they do want to, they do decide that they want to eat on that. And then, like I said, you know, once you've got this really lush, you know, bioactive environment, then you have some live moss you can put in there. I got some moss over in the corner. And then, you know, I just have like little pieces of butternut squash that's in there. As you can see, just falls apart as it rots. Now, I make sure that I have organic everything, by the way, when it comes to food. I know not to skip back to that, but the reason for this, and this is not because I'm promoting organic foods, it's because everything designed on organic pesticides, or pesticides in general, rather, it's all designed to kill these guys. Whether it's caterpillars or isopods or what have you, it is designed to kill these kinds of species. All of those poisons will kill them. So it's very crucial that you go with the organic butternut squash or organic whatever the hell you're deciding. I go with the butternut squash because these guys love to dig tunnels in it, and it's adorable. But back to the substrate, it's very crucial you have all of these pieces. Now, one thing of note, Repashy Morning Wood is a really great product you can use as well, and these guys freaking love it. So if you're not using Morning Wood in any of your detritivores, I highly recommend it. Now, one thing of note with the Morning Wood though is you want to make sure that you have an abundance of springtails. I always like to have just a little thing like this I just bought from somebody not too long ago with plenty of springtails added in there. And over time, I would say after about 2 weeks, you'll have an abundance of springtails within your colony, and they're going to help kind of take care of some of these things. Now, millipedes do naturally have beneficial mites that will always be on them, so that's just one thing to note when you have a pet millipede. That will help them just kind of eat some of the bad stuff that might get stuck within their significant amount of scales or around their mouth parts. But having the springtails and all of these rotting pieces within it are just going to create this amazing bioactive environment. So, you know, just don't be worried if you do see a little mold here or there. It's not a big deal, and trust me, the springtails and all the mites will take care of all of that. Now, with all creatures, ventilation is obviously crucial. They do need oxygen, and the way that all arthropods gain oxygen is through, whether it's book lungs or spiracles or something, it's all through some sort of anaerobic oxygenation. So it's really crucial you do have some sort of flow of oxygen. So what I like to do is just make sure that I have some sort of, apologize for the nose, or the noise rather. For my lids, I like to have these 2-inch, I use a 2-inch drill borer, and I just cut out a top, and then I put these 2-inch screens in here. And then for my sides, I use a 1-inch. And the reason for that is because I just don't want them to try to, I don't know, I'm just paranoid, I guess. But this will allow you to have a whole lot of oxygenation. Now, one thing of note is places like Ventmasters, they have those, 1 or 2-inch metal screens with the clips, for a very reasonable price. If you go on Amazon or anything like that, holy crap, you're gonna pay like $150 for 6 of them. So just make sure that you're shopping around and you're finding the right place. But it is very crucial that you have oxygen. Now, I know you might think, well, they go under the ground, so like, why is oxygen important? Well, because when they come back up, they need to make sure that there's enough ventilation to bring oxygen through it. Obviously, oxygen also absorbs into the soil and things like that. So ventilation is crucial, and because of humidity, you don't want it to be wet. And if you have not enough ventilation, you run into mold issues, you just die-offs. It's just not a good thing. So definitely make sure you have something like this that will really help you get the oxygen flow that you need for the ventilation. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we discuss just a couple cons. I'm gonna have a whole other video, by the way, just talking these guys up. So don't feel bad for the millipede. They're gonna get their time in the sun. But when it comes to the fecundity, or how many offspring they have, if you have Ivory Millipedes and you're doing everything right, you will now suddenly have a lot of Ivory Millipedes. So the reason I'm telling you this is because, especially if you decide to have an external heat pad, if you're somewhere that's a little bit colder or anything like that, just be prepared to have more than 1 millipede if you have 2 millipedes. Now, what's really cool is that when it determines on sex for Ivory Millipedes, it is very obvious which one is a male and a female. I think it's the 5th or 6th legs back. When you look on top of them, they'll have almost like an idiot helmet that you can see, and they'll have a shortened leg that is actually their gonadal something. It's got a name for it, but essentially that's what they use to, impregnate the females. They will lay significant amount of eggs. I believe it's like 400 eggs per. So when you're having some, you're gonna have a lot. So just keep that in mind when it comes to that. And onto the topic of heat pads, when it comes to adding additional heat sources, it's very crucial you follow 2 very basic rules. Either put the heat source on top, like for instance, heat lights or anything like that, if you have some sort of mesh cage, or put the heat pad on the side. I said earlier that bugs aren't super stupid, but where they may have some intelligence in some things, what they lack is an ability to understand why the hell are they overheating. If you put a heat pad on the bottom of a container, the millipede only knows that the sun is up and down is colder. So what they will do is they will keep burrowing down to escape the heat. And then what you're doing is you're now cooking your cyanide little filled buddy. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that it's on the edge of it, and that allows them to walk up next to it and get warm if needed. If you have a heat controlled house, 75 to 85 degrees or anything like that, there is absolutely no reason to add external heat unless you absolutely are paranoid. Now, if you live somewhere on the East Coast where it gets colder, then yeah, obviously you want to talk about externals, but they also do have heat emitters that can sit on top. You obviously can't do that in a plastic bin though, so just know that. But yeah, when it comes to that, just make sure that if you are going to add external heat pad on the side, and not like a reptile pad. Like, it has to be specific to smaller reptiles or specific to invertebrates, because if you use some of the ones that are for the bigger snakes, man, you're going to cook them so fast. So just keep that in mind. So let's talk a little bit about, is this the right pet for you, and what are some maybe cons? Because again, I'm going to have a whole devoted video to my absolute adoration and love of the creatures. But there are three major things about these guys that may not make them the best pet. Number one is they are boring as hell. Adorable, but do you know how cats will basically groom themselves and sleep absolutely all day? Guess what? So do they. They groom and sleep almost 90% of their lives. With the Ivory Millipede, though, the one benefit is they do spend a significant amount of time up top, unless, like the ones I have now, they're all pretty much in the middle of molting. So if you do have them, you will see them, unlike other species, which is a huge benefit. But for the most part, even when you do see them, they're doing this. They're laying there. I don't know if you can see this. And they're just chilling and sleeping freaking all day. It's pretty boring. So they're not exactly what I would call an exciting pet, but neither is a tarantula, and I love them. So just keep that in mind. Now, another thing I do want to discuss is if you're not into earthy smells or being dirty because you're touching soil, or you're concerned a little bit about maybe some fungus or something growing on some of the leaf litter, maybe not the best pet for you. If you're a clean freak, these guys are a little bit dirty, so you will sometimes have to get your hands a little bit dirty as well. So I wouldn't recommend this if you have any type of OCD or anything involving dirt, because a lot of time when you're working with a millipede, you're just going to be dirty. It is what it is with the Tretivores. Now, two last, and I would say the most major parts of ownership of any millipede, specifically with the Ivory Millipede, is that all millipedes secrete cyanide or some sort of toxin. This is very crucial when you're working with these guys, because if they're pissed off, they're going to leak this on you because they can secrete it from their bodies. And for some people, they're going to get a really nasty reaction from that. Now, maybe you don't, but you do not want to handle these guys and then go eat a sandwich, because you're going to make yourself sick. Isn't it enough cyanide that you're going to die right now? No, just don't eat them, because that will make you very sick. But you will be fine. I want to make sure that it's a note, because if you're deciding to get these guys for your pet or your kids or anything like that, rather, you will run the risk of them getting very, very sick if they're handling them, or if they're climbing on their skin and, you know, they drop some of their, they do secrete some of the cyanide. You could run risk of any kind of rash and things like that. So my recommendation is just play with them with gloves, or, you know, test the waters a little bit, hold them, and if you don't have any nasty reaction, you should be fine. Now, this is the most important part. Millipedes are dumb. So they have a nice crushing plate that they use to obviously chew up, you know, decay and leaves and all of those sort of things. They will bite you because they don't differentiate you from things that they want to eat. So sometimes they will get a little mouthy. Now, some people I know have never had to deal with this, but I have never held a millipede in my life without it trying to take a bite out of me in some capacity. So is it going to hurt you really badly? No, but if you're a little kid, this might hurt a little bit. So just know that they're kind of stupid. They secrete some cyanide, and you're going to basically have a box full of dirt. So if all of those things are not a selling point to you, or at least something that you can't ignore, this might not be the best pet for you. But if you can bypass all of that and you can deal with the fact that you are essentially dealing with the most chill organism on the planet that's going to give you lots of babies if that's what you're into, is great for any kind of vegetable that you're just already we're going to eat and you got to throw some of it away, or is just an all-around cool little creature to watch. And even people that I know that are afraid of bugs that have come around my millipedes, within 1 or 2 sessions, they're immediately obsessed with them because they're so absolutely adorable. So if you're okay with all of those things and it's worth the risk to you, then I definitely recommend the Ivory Millipede. I hope this care guide helps you. If you have any questions, please leave me comments below. As always, like and subscribe, and I am also on Instagram, and I own a shop if you don't know that, and these guys will be breeding here soon, so I will be placing them up for sale shortly. Thank you so much, and we'll talk real soon.